For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
Do I believe in conspiracies? Nah. Do I believe powerful people would get together and plan for certain outcomes? Nah. Do I believe powerful interests would operate outside the law and maybe even kill people? Nah. Do I believe secret government agencies might feel the need to assassinate a person and cover it up? Nah. I think everything in America is open and clean and above board, and powerful people always play by the rules. You know, that's my thought.
Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete.
We must teach our children that freedom is not inherited, but must be diligently defended against tyranny.
We're waging war.
Welcome to the Chris Level Show, Politics and Prophecy. He will share with you his theme of living life based on principles and not feelings. It's time for a return to our Judeo-Christian roots of laws and repent from the progressive liberal philosophy of what's convenient and feels good at the moment. Join him as he uncovers and exposes the spiritual wickedness that is robbing us of our inheritance that Jesus Christ promised us as a nation if we are obedient to his ways. Here's the host of the show, Chris Level.
Hello, hello, hello. I am Chris Levels, the host of Politics and Prophecy on FreedomizerRadio.com, Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, iTunes, and various other platforms out there. I also have a YouTube channel called Politics, no spaces, no hyphens, just Politics Prophecy. And I encourage you to go there, like, share, subscribe, help me to build the channel up, share it with your friends, loved ones, and those that you think the information is useful to. Again, that's Politics Prophecy. It helps if you put Chris Levels, Levels, behind it. It'll be easier to find. Also, I have a Politics and Prophecy Facebook page. So you're welcome to go there. It's where I put all the articles that I use for the day. So you can go there, and if you want to research deeper into some of the articles, they have the links there. Also, the videos that I take the audio clips from, I put them there in their entirety so that you can watch them with the images. A lot of times you don't get the full effect just with the audio clips, so you can see the full footage of what's there. And I also do that in the Freedomizer Radio chat room, where you can leave your comments. I'll answer them during the show in real time. If you would like to call in, you can do so at 319-527-6208, press 1. Again, 319-527-6208, press 1. Please keep your comments or your questions brief so that the show can continue on. But love to hear from you. So as we get started today on the 24th of January, we're moving through 2019 already. We're almost through this month, and we've got a lot going on. Praise God for his blessings and his favor in terms of allowing this show to go on and to grow. And talking about geopolitics, President Trump has a lot of things on his plate right now. And the latest, we've got the border wall, we've got the shutdown, we've got the situation with China and South China Sea and everywhere else, and we've got all of this division in the country of America. And to top it off now, we have that wonderful socialist utopia of Venezuela going through a much. As a matter of fact, this comes from the Washington Examiner. Maduro is no longer president of Venezuela, according to President Trump. This is by Joel Gerke. President Trump said Wednesday he is recognizing a political opponent of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as president of that country, as thousands of people were demonstrating against the Maduro regime. Today, I am officially recognizing the president of the Venezuelan National Assembly, Juan Guaido, as the interim president of Venezuela, he said. In its role as the only legitimate branch of government duly elected by the Venezuelan people, the National Assembly invoked the country's constitution to declare Nicolas Maduro illegitimate and the office of the presidency therefore vacant. Trump's declaration put his administration squarely in support of an ongoing effort to overthrow the Maduro regime. Guaido has been leading protests timed to coincide with the anniversary of a previous dictator's overthrow. The statement caps a week of escalating rhetoric from U.S. officials and regional leaders, while Maduro relies on the Venezuelan military to hold on to power. The people of Venezuela have courageously spoken out against Maduro and his regime and demanded freedom and the rule of law, Trump said. I will continue to use the full weight of United States economic and diplomatic power to press for the restoration of Venezuelan democracy. Okay, so in response to that, well, Maduro's not taking it down. This comes from Fox News. Maduro studying Venezuelan relations. President, let's stop this. Nicolas Maduro on Wednesday said he's cutting off relations with the U.S. and giving American diplomats 72 hours to exit the country. The socialist leader ordered a review of Venezuela's relationship with the U.S. hours after the Trump administration officially recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido as the nation's interim president. A day earlier, Vice President Mike Pence sent a recorded video to Venezuelans referring to Maduro as a dictator with no legitimate claim to power. He has never won the presidency in a free and fair election and has maintained his grip on power by imprisoning anyone who dares to oppose him, Pence said in the video. Hours after the video was sent on Tuesday, Maduro spoke on state television, saying that Pence had brought about a 200-year low in relations between the two countries by authorizing a coup. On Wednesday, Trump recognized 35-year-old Guaido, head of the opposition-controlled Congress, as the country's interim president. The citizens of Venezuela have suffered for far too long at the hands of the illegitimate Maduro regime, Trump tweeted after Guaido spoke to his supporters, and tens of thousands of protesters hit the streets in widespread protest against Maduro. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said later Wednesday that the U.S. stands with Guaido and does not consider former President Nicolas Maduro to have the legal authority to break diplomatic relations with the United States or to declare our diplomats persona non grata. Guaido's supporters shouting phrases including, "Get out, Maduro," say they're fed up with spiraling inflation, a shortage of basic goods, and a migration crisis dividing families. The protest is considered a crucial test for the reinvigorated opposition as it seeks to send a forceful message that Maduro no longer has the people's backing and appeals to the military and the poor to shift loyalties that until recently looked solidly behind the president. The protests were called to coincide with a historic date for Venezuelans, the anniversary of the 1958 coup that overthrew military dictator Marcos Pérez Jiménez. Maduro, who started his second term as president on January 11th after disputed elections, is facing increasing hostility from the international community. He has sought to show up support from the armed forces by doling out key posts to top generals, including one as the head of the oil monopoly that is the source of virtually all of Venezuela's export earnings. He has also been acting as commander-in-chief, appearing last week at a military command meeting wearing camouflage fatigues and receiving the blessing of the defense minister, General Vladimir Padrino Lopez. Maduro has accused the opposition of inciting violence with the aim of provoking a bloodbath. Top socialist leaders have threatened to unleash menacing motorcycle gangs of pro-government diehards known as colectivos. I demand the full rigor of the law against the fascists, Maduro said Tuesday night, blaming, quote, terrorist, unquote, allegedly linked to Guaido's Popular Will Party for a fire at a cultural center named for a pro-government lawmaker murdered in 2014. Well, in terms of what the international community has to say, well, they're not really taking this laying down. Russia condemns bid to usurp power from Maduro. This comes out of the BBC. Russia has condemned foreign powers for backing a Venezuelan opposition leader who declared himself interim president, calling it a bid to usurp power. Moscow said that the move violated international law and was a direct path to bloodshed. Juan Guaido declared himself interim leader on Wednesday, a move recognized by the U.S. and several other nations. President Nicolas Maduro, who retained some other nations' support, broke off relations with the U.S. in response. Mr. Maduro has been in office since 2013. He was sworn in for a second term earlier this month after winning a May 2018 election marred by an opposition boycott and widespread claims of vote rigging. Mr. Guaido is the head of the National Assembly, who has said articles within the country's constitution allow him to assume interim power because he believes Mr. Maduro's election and therefore presidency is invalid. He has vowed to lead a transitional government and hold free elections. U.S. President Donald Trump recognized Mr. Guaido as Venezuela's new head of state minutes after his declaration in the capital, Caracas, on Wednesday. Mr. Trump urged other nations to follow suit, but the move has divided much of the international community. 7 South American nations, as well as Canada and the UK, have now backed his call. Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt said on Thursday that the UK agreed that Mr. Maduro was not the legitimate leader of Venezuela. The United Kingdom believes Juan Guaido is the right person to take Venezuela forward, he said in a statement. The European Union has stopped short of recognition, but called for free and credible elections and said Mr. Guaido's freedom and safety should be respected. Mexico, Bolivia, and Cuba all expressed support for Mr. Maduro, while Turkish President Erdogan tweeted, "My brother Maduro, stand tall. We are standing by you." China, a major investor in Venezuela, said it opposed any outside interference. Moscow sees Venezuela as one of its closest allies in the region. It has lent billions of dollars and has backed its oil industry and its military. Russia has also taken part in military exercises in Venezuela. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, "We consider the attempt to usurp sovereign authority in Venezuela to contradict and violate the basis and principles of international law. Maduro is the legitimate head of state." A Russian foreign ministry statement said Mr. Guaido's declaration was a direct path to lawlessness and bloodshed, adding, "Only Venezuelans have the right to determine their future. Destructive outside interference, especially in the current extremely tense situation, is unacceptable." Russia also warned that any U.S. military interference would amount to adventurism, which is fraught with catastrophic consequences. He was asked, what did Mr. Trump say? He was asked about military intervention, and while he said he was not considering it, he added that all options are on the table. In a statement, he described Mr. Maduro's leadership as illegitimate, adding, "The people of Venezuela have courageously spoken out against Maduro and his regime and demanded freedom and the rule of law." It warned Mr. Maduro tougher sanctions could be imposed. The U.S. has urged the Venezuelan military to back Mr. Guaido, but so far it has remained loyal to Mr. Maduro. What was President Maduro's response? He accused Washington of trying to govern Venezuela from afar and said the opposition was seeking to stage a coup. "We've had enough interventionism. Here we have dignity," he said in a televised address from the presidential palace, where his supporters gathered to back him on Wednesday. The country's defense minister, Vladimir Pedrino Lopez, has accused Mr. Guaido of trying to launch a coup d'etat driven by foreign powers. Speaking at a news conference flanked by senior military figures, he said the declaration went against democracy, against our Constitution, against President Nicolas Maduro, the legitimate president. So the annual inflation rate reached 1,300,000% in the 12 months to November 2018, according to a study by the National Assembly. Mr. Maduro and his core supporters believe Venezuela's problems are caused by U.S. sanctions that have hampered the government by making it hard to restructure its debt. So we got a mess here. Now, that article, as I said, will be up on the Politics and Prophecy page. Right now, we're going to go to Mike Adams talking about the weaponization of government.
Now, continuing here with the inescapable evidence here that the human race is targeted for extinction, let's talk about geoengineering. Now, the scientific establishment has for years said there's no such thing as geoengineering, and yet all the time in the media you read these stories about how China is using weather control technology or Dubai is using weather control to try to create rain. And then you read in the scientific literature, which I review, by the way, every day. I have a team that scours over 1,300 medical and science journals, reading them, with human eyes. This is not some algorithm. This is real people scanning all the journals every day, bringing me the best stories, the best science stories, and new studies that are published in the scientific literature. So I have a very good handle on what's happening every day in the realm of mainstream science. And in that realm, they are now talking about this every day, geoengineering, global dimming, they call it, to dim the sun, that they think, the scientists say, this is how you stop global warming and save the planet. I mean, that's the cover story. But in reality, global dimming is a plot to release a massive amount of pollution into the upper atmosphere. In fact, they call this practice in the scientific papers, they call it, quote, stratospheric aerosol injection. Stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI. That's their name for what you and I might call chemtrails or geoengineering. This is in the scientific literature. You can look it up yourself. Go ahead, I encourage you to. You will find the science papers, or just search for geoengineering. That's also in over 100 published scientific studies. And they talk about how they need to dim the sun. They have to block the sun in order to stop the planet from overheating. Now, this climate change, this is a hoax. This is a hoax because it's all predicated on this false quack science idea that says carbon dioxide is a poison. That's what they say, carbon dioxide is a poison. Well, wait a minute. Carbon dioxide is the number one most important nutrient for plants. It's necessary for forests to grow. It's necessary for food crops to produce food. It's necessary for plants to grow leaves and pollen. Did you know that? Did you know that almond trees can't produce almonds without CO2? Did you know that there's no food in the food web without CO2? And CO2 is very, very low. It's just barely above 400 parts per million in the atmosphere right now, which is dangerously low. Plants are starving for it. And yet we're told by the EPA, which remember is a weapon system against humanity, we're told that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and that we have to eliminate carbon dioxide. Do you realize that if carbon dioxide were eliminated, that all human life would cease to exist on this planet? Do you know why? Because it would collapse the plants, and the plants produce the oxygen that keeps your brain functioning and your cells functioning. Hemoglobin. Your red blood cells carry oxygen. Why? Because every one of the cells in your body needs oxygen. The living cells, anyway, needs oxygen. Without oxygen in your cells, you die in minutes. That oxygen comes from plants, for the most part. O2. Plants produce O2 as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis has three inputs. All plants that are green, they have chlorophyll, and they use photosynthesis to produce their own metabolic energy, which produces, the food and the flowers and the leaves and the bark for the trees and everything, the root system, everything. It's all through metabolic energy, through photosynthesis. There are three inputs for photosynthesis. I'm going to name them for you here, so listen up. Democrats and globalists are attacking 2 out of the 3. They're attacking life on our planet. They are attacking the entire plant ecosystem, and they're calling it green. They think that they are green, and they're attacking 2 out of the 3 inputs for photosynthesis. It is unreal. These people are mass murderers. They are trying to carry out a holocaust of cosmic proportion. They are trying to murder not just all humans, but all mammals, most animals, and all plants on this planet. And they want to do it. They want to do it through global dimming. They want to pollute the atmosphere and call it saving the planet. This is how insane these people are, and this is why they must be stopped. They will kill us all if we don't stop them. They are mass murderers. They are trying to carry out a Holocaust that is over 1,000 times bigger than the Hitler Holocaust. I mean, think about it. The Hitler Holocaust murdered 6 million Jews, according to the historical records. This Holocaust that they're trying to do, they're trying to murder over 6 billion humans. More than that, all humans, which is over 7 billion. I think it's approaching 8 billion. 6 billion people murdered is 1,000 times more than the 6 million who were killed in the Holocaust of World War II. This is 1,000 Holocausts that they're trying to carry out, and they're doing it in the name of saving the planet. They want to murder humanity, and they dare say that they are saving the world. Think about the insanity, the madness of those quack scientists who say they want to pollute the air to save the planet. Pollution is now their solution? You see why it's called the Environmental Pollution Agency now? Because their goal is pollution. Their goal is to collapse all plant life, collapse the food production, collapse the crops, to poison the croplands, to poison the rivers and the streams, and poison the oceans, and have more dead zones in the oceans. Their goal is the mass murder of the entire human race. And they have the means to carry it out. So let's get back to the 3 inputs for photosynthesis, okay? Those 3 inputs are very simple. Sunlight, which is, of course, solar radiation. Carbon dioxide, which has to be acquired through the atmosphere. And then water, which plants tend to acquire through their root system. Those 3 things, you got it? Solar radiation, i.e. sunlight, CO2, and water. Now, sunlight provides energy. Actual electromagnetic energy. Carbon dioxide provides carbon atoms and oxygen atoms, and H2O provides hydrogen and oxygen. And believe it or not, with these molecules, plants can rearrange the elements through a number of chemical processes, or what's called plant physiology or botany, and they can rearrange those. And if you just use hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, you can generate hundreds of thousands of different molecules. For example, vitamin C is made out of just that. There's nothing else in vitamin C other than hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. Did you know that? In fact, did you know that THC, or CBD, from cannabis, did you know it's only made out of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen? Did you know that? I mean, the media never tells you these things. I'm telling you as a scientist. If you give a plant sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, it can make medicine called cannabidiol. It can make THC. It can make vitamin C. It can make proanthocyanidins. It can make carotenoids. It can make all these things from the different elements, recombining them. And some of the molecules need other elements like, nitrogen or phosphorus or sulfur. Garlic uses a lot of sulfur, and cruciferous vegetables make an anti-cancer nutrient called sulforaphane that also uses sulfur, by the way, which is an element. They can make medicine, and yet the globalism system is now trying to shut that down. They don't want plants to function. That's how dangerous they are. We'll be right back. Now, when you dim the sun, which is now the goal of mainstream scientists, this is what governments are going to do now. They're going to send jets into the atmosphere to release pollution into the stratosphere in order to block the sun. They want to dim the sun. What are they doing? What are they accomplishing? They say, it's going to stop the world from overheating. Now, the world isn't overheating. The world actually could be a little bit warmer. We could have more liquid water. Melting ice caps is not a bad thing. It's called the greenhouse effect because greenhouses is where plants grow well. You need more of a greenhouse. In fact, in greenhouses, did you know that greenhouse owners purchase carbon dioxide generators to raise the CO2 level inside the greenhouse so that the plants grow better? We need more CO2. We need a warmer planet. We need a wetter planet. It would be more lush, more green. It would support more ecological diversity, and more sustainable life, and it would produce more food more easily. Deserts could be turned into food crop lands, and grasslands could become forests, and regular forests could become rainforests. If we just had more CO2, a little bit warmer planet, more liquid water instead of frozen water. I mean, you can't grow a plant in frozen water. Have you ever tried to plant a seed in an ice ball? Guess what? It doesn't grow, does it? But that's what the globalists want, is a frozen ice ball planet with a dim sun. They want to block out the sun, they want to destroy CO2, and they want to freeze the earth so that all the water is locked up in the polar ice caps. That's what they want. Notice how they always scream about, oh, the ice caps are melting, as if that's a bad thing. It's an awesome thing. It releases liquid water that can be used by rainforests, by the way, because, of course, sunlight causes evaporation of water from the ocean, and that causes rainfall of water onto land, which is what supports forests and rainforests. If you have sunlight, you get that evaporation of water, don't you? But if you dim the sun, which is what these insane globalist scientists are trying to do, if you dim the sun, guess what? You get less evaporation from the ocean, don't you? So you get less rainfall because you don't have the wet wind blowing off the ocean anymore. So what happens then? Oh, areas that used to be forests, they become deserts. You have a collapse of ecosystems. This is what the globalists are trying to do. Food-producing areas will turn to deserts. At the same time, plant life will be strongly impaired. Photosynthesis will be diminished, which means oxygen production from those plants will be reduced, which means the atmospheric concentration of O2, i.e. oxygen, will fall, which means that humans will have trouble breathing. This is terraforming. What's happening right now on our planet is terraforming. Terraforming is the process of altering the atmospheric conditions of a planet to make it ready for colonization. Do you understand what's happening? Earth is being terraformed. Earth's atmosphere is being altered. The globalists are trying to turn Earth into a low sunlight, frozen world devoid of humans. This is the goal. This is the inescapable conclusion. Anyone who understands basic science must agree with this if they follow the rules of logic and reason. These experiments are being conducted right now. The entire corporate-controlled media is calling for this. They want to dim the sun. They want to pollute the skies. They want to collapse the food supply. They want to get rid of humans, even the wealthy globalists. They talk about depopulation. And what I'm here to explain to you is that this is really what you are witnessing and what you're part of here is a cosmic eugenics program to exterminate the human race that you are part of. And more than half the humans, probably 90% of the humans, are going along with it. This is genius. From a science fiction point of view, I'm not saying this is literally what's happening, but from a science fiction point of view, if you were, let's say, an advanced civilization and you wanted to go conquer some world somewhere, and that world had a lot of resources like water and gold and other rare elements like we have on Earth, and you wanted to eliminate the living organisms on that planet and prepare that planet for your colonization, instead of doing it by force, wouldn't it be really smart to send like an advanced team to go influence the world leaders on that world and convince them to commit suicide, convince them to kill themselves and alter the climate so that it's perfect for your arrival and colonization? Isn't that interesting? See, Earth's so-called leaders have been convinced to murder humanity. Earth's scientists have been convinced to terraform the planet. Earth's political leaders have been convinced to call for the global enslavement of humanity and the disarmament of humanity so that humans have no means to fight back against war or invasion or colonization of any kind.
You are listening to Politics and Prophecy with Chris Levels on FreedomizerRadio.com. We will be right back after these messages.
America's founding fathers warned against getting the United States entangled in foreign conflicts. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, since around 625 AD, Muslim factions have been slaughtering each other and planning a worldwide caliphate. For many years, America has been battling in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. It used to be that our mighty armed forces fought to totally defeat enemies. But ever since the kooky concept of rules of engagement, our military heroes have been hampered from fully engaging and defeating adversaries. It should not be difficult to understand that no enemy is defeated until they cannot fight back or start up again once you back off. ISIS has been reduced, but not yet defeated. Currently, there are 30,000 ISIS terrorists with about $450 million left to buy more armaments. I agree with President Trump that our great soldiers should come home, but first, they should be allowed to fully engage the enemy and light them up until they fully surrender or meet their maker. Our military has the skill set to get the job done quickly, if unleashed, without any foolish PC impediments. May God bless our military heroes and our republic. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us and 12 a.m. Sundays on Talk America Radio Network.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
All righty. Well, can't go through today's show without weighing in on the firestorm concerning the Covington Catholic High School students and what Nick Sandmann and others are going through down there in Kentucky. We've even ignorant representatives. This has got to be the most wretched class, freshman class of individuals coming in as far as Democrats in the history of this country. And this comes from conservativefiringline.com. Democrat Representative Ilhan Omar defends Black Hebrew Israelites against Covington teens, gets called out for her lies, as well she should. On Wednesday, freshman Muslim representative, Ilhan Omar issued a tweet defending the racist, homophobic Black Hebrew Israelites who taunted the Covington Catholic High School students. The tweet was taken down, but not before Omar was called out for her lies and threatened with a libel suit. Her tweet says, "The boys were protesting a woman's right to choose and yelled, 'It's not rape if you enjoy it.' They were taunting 5 Black men before they surrounded Phillips and led racist chants. Salmon's family hired a right-wing PR firm to write his non-apology. Although the tweet was taken down, an archived version of it can be seen here." So again, go to the link and check it out. Okay, and then Donald Trump sent a tweet out saying Nick Sandmann and the students of Covington have become symbols of fake news and how evil it can be. They have captivated the attention of the world, and I know they will use it for the good, maybe even to bring people together. It started off unpleasant, but can end in a dream. Robert Barnes, an attorney who offered to represent the Covington families free of charge, put Omar on notice, Christina Lila said. This is libel. Retract or get sued. Twitchy asked, did she watch any of the videos? Does she have any comment on what the Black Hebrew Israelites were saying to the boys? Does she care about any of it? It's obvious she doesn't care, nor does she care about truth, fact, or anything approaching reality. As for watching the full video, would it really matter if she had? And there are others that weighed in. Don't count on it, is all it says. And then there's a bunch of tweets here. Indeed, these are interesting and wild times. Just think, this is the new Democrat majority controlling the House of Representatives. Makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, doesn't it? No, not for me, not at all. But sticking on the control of the narrative, we go to Breitbart.com. I found this very interesting. Microsoft NewsGuard to create news blacklist. Now, until yesterday, I hadn't even heard of NewsGuard. This is by Alam Bokhari. Without consulting with its users, Microsoft has installed an establishment media browser extension purportedly designed to rate the accuracy of news websites as a default extension on mobile versions of its Edge browser. In practice, it creates a news blacklist by warning users away from sites including Breitbart News, the Drudge Report, and the Daily Mail. The browser extension, called NewsGuard, presents users with a red warning label if they navigate to a site that it judges to be unreliable. A green rating is given to websites that NewsGuard considers worthy. Give you 10 seconds to figure out which ones that they consider newsworthy, and they all include ones that have CIA control as well as Council on Foreign Relations. The browser extension, a number of pro-Trump websites, including Breitbart News, are giving a red rating by the extension. The website of the conservative-leaning British newspaper, the Daily Mail, which has third highest circulation in the UK, is also given a red warning. NewsGuard says the site fails to maintain basic standards of accuracy and accountability. WikiLeaks, which has never had to retract a story due to false or misleading information, is also given a red rating. Among the websites given a green rating is BuzzFeed, which was recently humiliated for publishing alleged details about the ongoing Mueller investigation that were contradicted by the special prosecutor himself. BuzzFeed did not retract the story and even led with it on its front page after Mueller contradicted it. But in NewsGuard's view, BuzzFeed regularly corrects and clarifies errors. Many of the websites that recently fed the fake news feeding frenzy against students of Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky, who were falsely accused of taunting a left-wing Indian agitator, are also given a green rating. Times and the Washington Compost. Also green, Media Matters, Clintonite Democrat website that regularly publishes hit jobs against conservative media publications and personalities. Rolling Stone, the magazine infamous for publishing a hoax rape allegation against members of a University of Virginia fraternity in 2015, is also given a green rating. NewsGuard says the outlet has consistently published well-researched factual information about contemporary American culture. Some left-wing sources are given red ratings by NewsGuard. However, they tend to be on the anti-establishment side of democratic politics. Share Blue and the Daily Cause, for example, both have red ratings. Salon and Huffington Post, however, do not. It shouldn't be surprising that NewsGuard has a bias against independent and anti-establishment media, though. The team behind the browser extension include top neocons and members of America's foreign policy establishment, including Trump-hating former CIA Director Michael Hayden and former members of the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations. I have an update here. Microsoft replied to Breitbart News with the following statement. Microsoft is partnering with NewsGuard to offer the NewsGuard browser extension on Microsoft Edge and a feature in Microsoft Edge mobile apps for iOS and Android to help our customers evaluate news sources. Across both the browser and the apps, NewsGuard is optional and customers need to take action if they want to use the feature, a Microsoft spokesperson said. So, yeah, I don't know why anybody would sit up there and allow other people to tell you what to read or what not to read. You should be able to, as an adult, discern information, research it, understand the history of the people who are putting it out. I mean, that's up to you. We don't need anybody else. I don't need anybody else telling me what I should read and what I shouldn't read. I can smell falsehoods and lies a mile away. Okay. Got some Headlines here. John Kelly joins establishment push for Trump to quit fight over border wall. Oh, share. Fed should stick Trump in straitjacket and put his A in prison. You need to be put in a straitjacket. Kate Hudson, raising her daughter genderless. We don't know what she's going to identify as. Oh, wow. Missouri gym owner, veterans offensive Trump shirt made patrons uncomfortable. I read that story. This guy in Missouri was working out, had a Trump 2016 shirt on, and the owner, he had been wearing it plenty of times. The owner came up and said it made her feel uncomfortable as well as other patrons because he was supporting a racist agenda. But the good news is another gym, after he went home and put it on Facebook, another gym offered him a membership for free for a year. So good for them. Let's see here, because we got a shocking revelation coming up. Let's see. Oh, Democrat hopefuls court Al Sharpton and National Action Network. You know the country's gone when Al Sharpton has influence. President Donald Trump, State of the Union, won't happen until after the shutdown ends. I don't understand why not, but I don't know why he's doing that. Kushner, GOP senators suggest giving green cards to illegal aliens. Isn't that wonderful for those that actually believe the GOP is an opposition force? But anyway, let's move on to, what is it? A shocking revelation for America.
You're doing a great job of modeling courage in the face of fire.
Well, there's something I'd like to say, maybe in closing, about courage. People say that to me, and I don't think it's exactly right. There's a line in the Old Testament: the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And I think it's more like that. It's not that I'm courageous, it's that I'm afraid of the right things. So when I made my videos, it wasn't like that didn't make me nervous. But I was less nervous about going back to bed and not saying what I had to say than I was about making the videos, because I know where this is going. I don't want to go there.
That's something beautiful that your wife said to you. In reality, we are all broken somehow, right?
He said we're all broken, and we all need the redemption of Christ, and we've grown together in our faith, and we've been married now for 20 years. Thank you.
So we don't want to, it's Pascal talked of the glory and the scum. To reach our full humanity, it seems to me we need to understand both intention.
Now, Carl Jung,
the unbelievable scum that lies in terms of our potential at the bottom of every heart. The extraordinary nobility, you call it the spark of divinity, I would say made in the image of a mighty creator. You've got to hold those things in suspension if you're to find your real humanity. And in fact, the way through to the good place is surely through the valley of darkness in the first place.
Well, then you think, well, if it's possible to be enlightened, why isn't everyone enlightened? It's like, well, you don't get to paradise, you don't get to heaven without harrowing hell first, right? And who's going to do that? Like, that's a terrible thing to do. It isn't even clear that you can survive it. No, I mean, it's brutally damaging to come to terms with your own proclivity for malevolence, and so people don't do it, and it's no wonder. But the funny thing is, and this is also something that I think that people who've been watching my lectures have been attracted by, especially the young men. It's like, until you understand that you're a monster, until perhaps you even develop that as a capacity, you don't have the moral force to do good. And so not only is that descent to begin with necessary to scare you straight, right, to make you understand what exactly it is that you're dealing with, but you don't even have the strength of character to be good until you understand just exactly what sort of monster you can be. Like, that doesn't work. And so you watch the people around you who thrive, regardless of what they say, they act out the proposition that everyone matters. And then you have a functional society. And I think, okay, well, if when you act out the proposition that everyone matters, you have a functional society, maybe that's evidence that that proposition is true. It's like, I think it's true. I think the idea that the individual has a spark of divinity within him or her, I think there isn't a more true way of saying that. And if you act that out, well, goes back to the idea that you brought up about potential, which is also something I've discussed with my audiences a lot. It's like, we don't act like we live in a material reality. We act like we face a landscape of potential, an external landscape of potential, with an internal reservoir of potential. That's how we act. And then we call each other out on it. We say things like, well, you're not living up to your potential. And the person goes, so yeah, well, I know. It's like, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Well, you mean there's more to you than meets the eye. Even though it's not measurable, right? It's not tangible. It's just possibility. But everyone acts as though that's a reality. And we all act as if we make choices about what reality to bring into being. We punish ourselves for our moral errors, and other people as well. We act out this ethic that puts us each at the center of being as active participants in the world that we want to bring forward. Everyone acts that way. And if we don't, then things go to hell instantly. So it's like, well, what do we believe? This is the argument I've had with people like Sam Harris, the atheist types. It's like, yeah, you think you're atheist, man. It's like, you're Christian, Judeo-Christian, let's say, to the core. You just don't understand it. You just don't realize it. And it's understandable, but it's not helpful.
A relationship with Jesus. I know you have Christian faith, but I would like to know what's the role that the Christian faith play when you were in the hole and they rescue.
The rescue. Well, I think, the Lord never left me. I left the Lord. And so when I began to start working my way back to dealing with these issues, I sat down with, and this is the last question, right? I sat down with a Christian therapist, and we began to talk about my life just as we are today and all the painful things that had happened. And so as we went through these things, I had written them down on a yellow-lined piece of paper, and we went outside his office and put a match to them and torched them and let them go away in the air. And he said, let's go back in and pray. And so we went back into his office, and he was one of these people who would pray for hours at a time. I was a person who would pray for a minute at a time and be done with it. But he wanted to pray. And so I went back and began to pray with him. And during that time of prayer, which I had already confessed to the Lord that I had lived my life wrong and I wanted to be redeemed and restored, and I had been working toward that end. During that prayer, with my eyes closed, the Lord came to me in white. He was reaching out to me, and I looked during this prayer, and I could see myself as a little baby wrapped in cloth, and the Lord picked me up. I could see that it was me, and He held me in His arms, and the Lord spoke to me and said, you are now safe with me forever. And at that point, I was redeemed and restored and have been ever since. Thank you.
If I lay out the rationale for the Christian ethic, which is something like pick up your damn cross and struggle uphill, which is a really good message, they think, oh yeah, well that makes a lot of sense. It's like, well, I don't need the metaphysical baggage. It's like, well, maybe you do and maybe you don't, but even to pick up the practical utility of that idea, which is overwhelming, that's an excellent start. I was thinking the other day, a journalist asked me why people are responding so positively to what I'm saying, the young men, for example, and I thought, why? Yeah, that's a good question. He says, well, I'm actually on their side. I'm really happy that they're not wasting their lives. I'm really sad to see that people are disenchanted and nihilistic and depressed and anxious and aimless and perverse and vengeful and all of those things. It's terrible. And then to see people question whether that's necessary and then to start to rise out of it. It's like, it's so fun. Like last night I was after my talk, it's overwhelming. I don't usually think about these things, but I was after my talk last night, and so all these people line up, and they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and attentive when they come up to talk to me, and then they have 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them, and they're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I think, oh, that's so good. Somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I hadn't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual is an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around them. It's a chain reaction, and so it's a lovely thing to see. And
that's fantastic.
Yes, it is. Jordan Peterson has a great message, and he's really skyrocketed to prominence. And he's got a lot of good things to say. So, speaking of people doing good things, it is time for Bill and Phyllis Phelps and the House of Hope promo. I hope you will consider supporting their cause and their purpose, which is to help women come out of addiction that have children. And I hope you will consider supporting them at House of Hope NH, as in New Hampshire.org.
In 2015 to 2016, 130,000 people died in this country of an overdose. That's a city. And we ain't doing enough.
Unfortunately, this is a problem that hits all of us. Somehow, some way. It doesn't care what faith you are, what color you are, where you're from, or where you've been.
It takes your hair, your teeth, your skin, your every relationship you have. I had burnt every bridge. In 1984, I found myself struggling with drugs and alcohol, and I was having a teenage pregnancy.
I struggled with a drug addiction as well. I had a son who is now 4 that I lost custody of due to my addiction.
We lost our daughter to an overdose of heroin. She was left in a parking lot of a hospital in Springfield, Vermont. By the time anybody could get to her to save her, it was too late.
I was raised in a wonderful, God-fearing home. We went to church every Sunday. I barely graduated high school, and when I did, I was a full-blown crystal meth addict. I wanted to feel accepted, and I wanted to feel loved, and I wanted to, more than anything, feel numb. When I turned 21, I found out I was pregnant, and I got married. My ex-husband also struggles with addiction and is extremely violent. I found myself beat up and laying on the ground, and I had just given up, and I finally said, God, if you're real, you are going to free me from this relationship, and you are going to set us free, and you are going to make a way where there is no way. And that's exactly what God did.
And I remember that very phone call where I actually heard someone's love for me. I heard someone pray for me, and I knew that this was where I needed to be.
For the first time in my life, I felt the love of the Lord, and I walked through those front doors, and they opened their arms, and they said, welcome home.
I showed up at the door of this home with the clothes on my back. They took me in, they loved me, and they taught me the Word of God. They taught me how to live without drugs and alcohol controlling me.
During my walk through New Life Home, not only has the Lord restored my son back to me, He has restored my family back to me. The chains that have been bound around me are no longer there. They're broken. I no longer walk in that shame. I no longer walk in that discouragement. And I'm no longer deemed an addict. I'm no longer deemed a terrible mother. I'm deemed the daughter of the one true King. I now have life. I'm alive, and I am so grateful for that. I am so grateful that my son is alive.
We honestly believe that if our daughter
had an opportunity to experience what you're going to allow people to experience, she'd be here today. Brandy's biggest fear was leaving her daughter Malaya, and that's why she left the programs that she was in. The opportunity to keep a mother and a child together should not ever be a question.
I would have never, ever left without my kids.
My mother wouldn't separate from me, even if it meant not getting the help that she needed. I know that the program was really transformative for my mother. When she left the program, she had the coping skills she needed to face life without turning to drugs, without turning to alcohol.
A lot of programs today are 30-day, 60-day, 12-day programs. They don't work. We know. Everything we're reading and studying says 18 to 24 months is the key. Because once they get better, they need to be reacclimated. And then they need to be supported as they go into their new lives.
We take these girls, get them the education that they need, get them up on how to manage their family, their finances, and how to manage a home with a job without being controlled by drugs.
It is a Christian home, and it's built on faith, and it's faith in God and faith in love. What we honestly hope is that there's going to be a point in our lives where we need less homes. The reality is that today they're needed more than ever.
You know, when they chose the name the House of Hope, I think that's truly what we're offering here.
Yes, they are. So again, I will ask you to support them. They need everything from dollars to diapers, and they are doing great work out of Monadnock, New Hampshire. And believe me, it isn't only the inner cities that have problems with drugs and addictions. It's everywhere in America. So please consider going to House of Hope NH, as in New Hampshire.org, houseofhopenh.org, and becoming a supporter of Bill and Phyllis Phillips' work there. Well, let's move on to this article out of News Pipeline, and then I've got a follow-up article behind it. This war upon men is another veiled attempt to bring down America. Dear feminists, real women do not want their men sissified. Masculinity is not the problem. You are, by Susan Duclos. We have all seen the toxic masculinity courses being taught in colleges across America, and just today we see that there are now masculine confession booths being set up at the University of Regina, along with other workshops to combat hypermasculinity as part of a Man Up Against Violence initiative. According to the Man Up Against Violence website, it says they will challenge mindsets and behaviors with regard to the social construction of masculinity and its relationship with violence. Stop right there. Let's blow that myth up from the get-go. Studies have proven societies dominated by women are just as violent as societies dominated by men. In fact, the results of 20 studies on the subject, 9 showed violence increasing with more male-dominated societies, and 9 showed violence increased with more female-dominated societies. 2 came back listed as inconclusive. Following those studies, which contradicted the popular myth of violence associated with maleness, came another in 2016, which found that not only are men less violent when surrounded by men, but actually become more violent in societies where women are in the numerical ascendancy. The study authors set out to investigate the assumption that societies with more men than women would suffer from elevated levels of aggression driven by a glut of testosterone-fueled unmarried men. However, somewhat surprisingly, they found the exact opposite to be true, discovering that violent crime committed by males actually rises when women are in the numerical ascendancy. To conduct their investigation, the researchers used data from the 2010 U.S. Census to determine the sex ratio in each of the country's 3,082 counties. They then cross-referenced this with figures obtained from the FBI in order to examine how these ratios correlated with levels of violent crimes between men, such as murders and assaults, and sexual crimes like rape, prostitution, and other sexual offenses. We find rates of homicide, aggravated assault, rape, sex offenses, and prostitution, commercial vice to be more common in counties with more women than men, explain the authors, adding that counties with more men have lower rates of crime and violent behavior. These findings, they say, challenge conventional claims of male excess leading to elevated levels of violence. Those studies are supported by the fact that in countries such as China and areas where men overwhelmingly dominate women, prostitution and trafficking levels are considerably lower. It seems from the recent studies that maleness and masculinity are not the underlying issue here. The women are. Where are the feminine toxicity classes and course and work groups? Where are the feminist confession booths so that they can repent for their sins? We see none. So what is behind this constant attack? Initiated by today's brand of feminists along with the LGBT community against masculinity in men. Sissify, the definition, to feminize a man, most often by forcing him to wear women's clothing, typically gaudy and overly feminine to enhance his humiliation. The feminists of yesteryear wanted equality, but never did we see them attempting to attack masculinity or attempting to sissify men, belaboring the lack of femininity in men. No, they, like most women, wanted men to be men. But today's feminists relentlessly attack men, yet claim victimhood if a man defends himself or refuses to buy into the male toxicity argument. The other day I ran across a video, and let me say, I thought it was a joke, satire. Then I read through the comments and the responses from the channel owner or someone given the rights to comment under their name and realized it wasn't a joke. These people were serious and are very angry that people were laughing and thinking it was a joke. It was from the Boston Antifa, supposedly an anti-fascist group that uses fascist methods to suppress their opponents' right to free speech. In the video, a feminist member is encouraging Antifa groups to have more females in positions of leadership and for the male members to start dressing like women. Before we see a young man doing so in a wig, bright red lipstick, and female clothing, including a short skirt. Now, in this video, it says, fair warning, she drops an F-bomb, and his skirt shows the top half of his butt, but the video is important in relation to what we are seeing across the country where, quote, men, unquote, are being sissified and humiliated, all in the name of feminism. And there's an article here, 5 ways women are trained to hate men. I think I'm going to go share that also. What needs to be understood here is that it isn't just this Antifa chapter, but as we see just today, a school board had to be forced by concerned parents to remove a book that was basically indoctrinating elementary school age students by encouraging little boys to wear dresses. The controversial story was meant to introduce kids of kindergarten age to the idea of gender fluidity, and it was chosen as part of the lesson plan for the first graders at Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools for Child Abuse Prevention Month. Tammy Fitzgerald, executive director of North Carolina Values Coalition, says she was tipped off about the book by a teacher who complained parents were not told the book would be added to the curriculum. It's clearly geared to young children. The book is meant as a tool of indoctrination to normalize transgender behavior. I think a lot of parents would object to that, she said. Eventually, after a petition and protest, the book was pulled. The purpose of our elementary schools is to teach writing, reading, and arithmetic, not to encourage boys to wear dresses. These lessons found in the book, Jacob's New Dress, are not appropriate for any child whose parents support traditional family values, a statement on the NCVC website reads. Of course, how could any of us forget how Temple University forced their Army ROTC students to walk around in high heels for feminist consciousness raising in a walk a mile in her shoes event? I would have, oh my goodness. I wish they would have tried. And you got to see the image. It's just ridiculous. The sissification of men has gotten so many people confused that now transgender men that dress as women are complaining that women that wear pussy hats like those worn in the vulgar vagina march over inauguration weekend are oppressing them with a message of having a vagina is essential to womanhood. Newsflash, it is. If you do not have a vagina, you are not a woman. Deal with it. It is basic biology. For this category, I'm going to suggest you click the next link. The entire piece is a must read because there is no way to explain it as well as Dr. Melody Millam Potter. But it seems that not only are chemicals found in everyday products feminizing men, but there are a number of chemicals that are literally causing genital disruption in fetuses and turning what should be male babies into females, which explains why the male population is decreasing. Male births have been in decline for decades, while researchers say developmental genital damage from chemical exposure can become hereditable. It is very important for pregnant women to be aware of this and the science behind it. And Dr. Potter also provides a list of what chemicals are harming fetuses. There is a war on men happening right now by so-called feminists that have nothing but disdain for the male population, attacking them at every given opportunity. Yet if a man defends against those attacks, he is labeled sexist or misogynist. The only men these women, and I use that term loosely, do not attack are the ones they are able to sissify and utterly humiliate because they want a nation of weak sissies pretending to be men. To men out there that are subject to these attacks, man up. Refuse to allow it because normal women do not want their men sissified. To the feminists out there, masculinity is not the problem. The fact that today's feminists have become unbearable shrews is the problem. The first video below is most likely one of the most offensive videos you'll ever see, created in 2014 by feminists who used or paid children, little girls, to basically drop as many F-bombs as they could in the name of proclaiming they should have equal rights. The reason I'm using it here is because these children are the next generation of man-hating feminists, unbearable shrews. Hating men, sissifying men, with feminists teaching their children to do the same is becoming the culture, and unless we understand it and actively fight back against this, it will continue to get worse. Yeah, and that was 2017. So we see that it has gotten much worse. Now, I'm going to go here, 5 ways women are trained to hate men. It comes out of rightwingnews.com by John Hawkins. Let's see here. David Wong over at Cracked, who normally does excellent work, wrote a piece called 5 Ways Modern Men Are Trained to Hate Women. Not only did I think the article was not up to Wong's usual standards, I thought he had it backwards. There is actually more propaganda aimed at getting women to hate men than vice versa. Number 1, Hollywood, or as I call it, Hollyweird, commercials. Ever heard of the Lifetime Network? Every man is a menacing stranger. Every husband, a wife-beating philanderer, and every date, a potential rape waiting to happen. Then there's the hapless, incompetent father character who has become such a staple of television shows and commercials that he's become a stereotype. There are lots of groups that can and do complain about how they're portrayed on TV, but men could fetch as much as any of them if they so desired. Number 2, women's magazines / romance novels. You might think women's magazines are all about today's empowered women who are starting their own businesses, competing with men on their own terms, and working their way to the top in politics. Not quite. In other words, women buy women's magazines to figure out which sort of men they should pursue and how to please them so they can get married. That's kind of shallow, but not any more so than men who buy men's magazines primarily to figure out how to impress women. The problem is that women's magazines, like romance novels, have set the bar so high that there are like 12 guys who need it. This is what they're telling women they should be shooting for. A man is basically looking for a woman he thinks is attractive, who admires him, who's nice to him, who wants to take care of him, and who likes to cook and have sex. In other words, it's still probably the same basic formula that cavemen were using. The message women get today, on the other hand, is that they should be looking for a man who looks like a cross between a bodybuilder and a professional model, who should either be filthy rich and or a Viking pirate vampire who's incredibly dangerous and romantic, but can be converted into a house hubby via his emotion-releasing attraction to a woman so they can live happily ever after in eternal passion and complete comfort forevermore. One of the biggest reasons that the age people first get married in this country has gone up considerably over the last few decades is the ideal consistently presented by women's magazines and romance novels is so far out of line with reality that almost every real man women run across seems like a disappointment in comparison. The court system. The whole women can do anything a man can do, we're empowered thing reminds me of a tactic Jon Stewart likes to use. He makes a serious commentary that he wants to affect how people think, but when he gets called on it, he says, I'm just a comedian. You can't take what I say at face value. In other words, it's clown nose on, clown nose off, based on whatever best suits his purposes. We get the same thing with the court system. Men and women both have equal responsibility to take care of a child. So can the father have shared custody after a divorce? No. The kid needs his mother. The woman makes more than the man. Can he have alimony? A man getting alimony? That's ridiculous. Women are just as tough as men and can do anything they can do in the office. Unless, oh my gosh, someone told a joke about a prostitute and a priest walking into a bar. I'm traumatized. It's almost as bad as the swimsuit calendar on the wall. That's sexual harassment. A good-looking guy asks a woman out and she goes. An unattractive man asks a woman out and it's sexual harassment. Clown nose on. Women are empowered and strong. Clown nose off. Women are delicate little flowers who will be bruised by being treated the same way men are on a day-to-day basis. 4, politics. Haven't you heard about the war on women? Women are being asked to pay for their birth control just like men are. So obviously they're being kept down. Haven't you heard that women don't make as much as men? Granted, they don't work as much either, or in professions that are as dangerous or unpleasant. But still, it's men keeping women down. The rhetoric doesn't need to have anything to do with reality. It just has to be useful to the politicians using it to try to get elected. 5, liberal feminism. Liberal feminism has as much to do with hating men as it does with empowering women. It tells women that there's a patriarchy out there that doesn't exist, that men have it better than women, plays up any and all grievances between men and women, tells women they're victims, and generally does all it can to promote gains for women at the expense of men. Liberal feminism is more of a man-hater's philosophy than it is a way to lift up women. Thank goodness that there are so many women out there who don't pay attention to the conditioning that's all around them in modern American society. Yeah, well, I've run into quite a few that actually do pay attention to this mess. So let's stay on this and back to All News Pipeline. Toxic feminism is a real problem. Modern day feminists are angry, manipulative, controlling, racist. As I say, bigots. Time for a national discussion about what is actually destroying society. Okay. Feminism, as it was back in our grandparents' days, was the belief that women and men should have equal rights and opportunities. Then came the second wave, the third wave, and then finally the fourth wave, each one mutating into more and more radical ideology that went from fighting for equal rights to demanding more rights. Present-day feminism is the real problem because these liberal feminists are not just radical, they are dangerous and deserve the word toxic far more than masculinity does. Toxic feminism, as described by the Urban Dictionary, is an embodiment of double standards and misandry, void of self-reflection, where third-wave feminists believe it is okay to behave rudely towards the opposite sex for no other reason than the fact they are male. They condemn what they deem as toxically masculine behaviors among men, such as competitiveness, love for physical activities, and emotional stoicism. Ironically, they see no fault with their juvenilely privileged and sheltered female behaviors, such as spreading gossip, commenting on one another's clothes, oogling hot guys, and overreacting emotionally to trivial things. The victimhood mentality lives large in modern-day feminism. I have spent the better part of the day delving into feminist websites. I would say poor me, but it was my choice, and I am not a victim, despite the constant portrayal on those sites of women always being the victim, bombarding me in almost every article I read on those sites. That mindset and mentality is absolutely harmful to women, convincing themselves that they don't get anywhere because of patriarchy, or how they are all part of a marginalized group that suffer because others that do not agree with their ideology don't agree. In their mind, that automatically makes those that disagree with them sexist bigots. They love to spew the terms white male dominance and white male entitlement or privilege. One sentence from an article over at the feminist website the establishment encapsulates the victimhood mentality continuously seen throughout the feminist movement today. The article was a screed titled, "Beware, the dog whistle of the birth rate drop." And the writer at one point said, "This has been a pretty good year for women, in so much that life in a hellscape can be good." Yes, that is right. In the mind of the modern day toxic feminist, simply being a woman is a hellscape. You know, I had to stop here because you can draw a connection between what's going on in the Black community, or I should say the African American community, because it's the same mentality. It's the same spirit that is driving this nonsense. By the end of the article, I noted a link to another title, "Looking for a Comment Section." We don't have one. I'll admit, I knew what I was going to find, but I wanted to see how they phrased their excuses. Evidently, the site was founded by 6 women, and each explained why they decided not to have comments, and no surprise, because they are victims of people saying mean things to them if they have an unmonitored comment section. One called it free speech run amok. Another claimed, "Never once has been called a worthless CUNT contributed to my personal growth. Never once has being threatened with rape inspired intellectual advancement. Nary a single time has being called ugly and stupid enriched my life or society in any way." They pretty much admit, without stating it outright, they don't want open dialogue because they don't like what people say about them and their opinions. As someone with open comments, I can say a comment section can be an informative, pleasant, fun, active place to have great debates, and with just Stephan and I being the primary moderators versus that site having 6 people as they could have monitoring their site, it is not difficult to enforce a civility guideline if they wanted true dialogue. They obviously don't, because victimhood. I could detail examples from some of the 30 radical feminist websites I found at one link, although many of them haven't posted in months, or the top 7 essential ones that Bustle recommended, but the examples of hate, anger, calling anyone that disagrees with them ableist, and the general victimhood mentality examples are too numerous for one article. I'll admit, I refused to go on after I hit the one called Bitches Magazine. I mean, really? And I'm going to continue this on after the break, because right now we're going to change the flow and go to the last installment of Prosperity Preachers in Hell Losing Their Souls.
Unjust rich Jesus took me to a place in hell where rich men who have grown rich with the misfortune of others' other lives were destroyed in misery, and others had to die for the success of these men. These men who became rich at the expense of the poor are in the fiery furnace at that time. They were blamed for many people dying of starvation and malnutrition. They were rich, they died poor, they could not bring their money along with them, they would come down poor to the hell's galleries. They had success, fame, and a lot of money. At the height of their glories, death reaped their lives and they were forgotten on earth. The tendency of the one who climbs is to descend. Those who go up too high will one day descend, just as Lucifer came down. All the kingdoms of the Bible that were once great and reached the top of the world fell. The higher they climbed, the greater their falls. Jesus became a servant, humbled himself to be exalted among the nations. The secret for the Christian to continue to rise is to descend into humiliation before God. I was exalted by my ego, but Jesus struck me when he cast me into hell. There I was nothing, I looked like a funny demon figure. You can be the most powerful man on earth and command the army of soldiers in your favor. When you get to hell you'll just be a soul like any other person. There is no difference between the president and the homeless in hell. Both died without Jesus. Suffering is the same for all. The same flame that burns the body of the rich will burn the body of the poor. I saw in hell a rich man and a poor man suffering together, side by side. Both were charred by the fire and became like burning charcoal. My nostrils could not stand the stench of carrion in hell. I was disgusted by the smell of rotten flesh from proud people. They stank and pieces of their flesh fell to the ground full of worms. I was proud, now I am humble. Models and beauty queens. I saw models and beauty queens in hell. From their bodies exuded a strong stench of carrion. They prided themselves on their beauties and despised people who did not have their beauties. In hell, they felt their own disgust at the wounds they opened on various parts of her body. The skins of these beauty queens fell to the ground, their flesh melted because of the heat of the fire, their beauties did not prevail in that place. Heaven. Jesus took me from hell and ascended with me to heaven. I entered a wonderful city of diamond and gold streets where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. By my works, I did not deserve to be in that place. I was very moved when Jesus told the angel to write my name in the book of life for the first time. My name was never written in that book, despite being a bishop. To enter the one has to be holy and walk the way which is narrow. Without renunciation, there is no paradise for Christians. True prosperity. Jesus told me the true meaning of prosperity. It is not earthly but heavenly. To obtain this prosperity from heaven you have to reject the riches of this world. I saw the spiritual heritage that Jesus left for the church. They are mansions of gold guarded for every faithful servant who still lives on earth. The church does not seek what is fleeting. Seek what is eternal. Everything on earth passes and are perishable. The treasures in heaven are accumulated for the saints who work for God and live the truth. All these riches are in heaven where moth nor rust does not consume. There are no thieves that to steal your treasures that God has saved for you. On earth, the earthly riches that are gathered together are consumed by moths and rust. The riches of the earth cannot be carried to eternity when one dies. The riches of the children of God are eternal and will always be waiting for their owners to be delivered to everyone who conquers. Jesus said he will deliver the rewards to the winners in person. River of life. Jesus led me to the crystal clear river and said, enter into it and receive purification. When you put your feet into these waters, a new creature will be born that will not be the same person when you return to earth. I entered the river and Jesus told me to walk to the front. The further I went, the more I sank down. From the waist, the water level rose to my chest until I sank into it. I did not feel my feet on the floor. Jesus said, just as these waters are, so it is in the spiritual world. Those who pray and seek my presence will deepen in grace. The depths of my mystery are for those who take pleasure in me and do not stop worshipping me. I continued to walk to the bottom of the river, my body floated and I was led east toward a white light. I felt a coolness, those waters were cleansing and purifying my soul. I could not walk because of the current that guided me to the east. Those waters filled my emptiness and quenched my thirst. Jesus said, the man who seeks my presence will deepen his spiritual life. The stream of my spirit will guide him, taking control of the lives of my servants. Everyone who gives me their lives, my spirit takes over. That white light you saw in the east is my spirit. The waters that soaked you are my word. All who seek me will be drawn and brought to my spirit. Those who die to the world are guided by my spirit. Dive into these waters. Rescue. I dived, and when I opened my eyes I was already on earth. I was dead one day. I saw heaven and hell. The doctors removed the bullet from my chest in that complicated surgery. I spent a few days in the hospital recovering from the injury. During the days I was in the hospital, many sick people died. I saw devils gathering the departing souls. It was terrifying to hear the cries that these souls gave when the demons came to get them. The Lord allowed me to see everything that was happening at that moment. A 15-year-old girl was hospitalized. Her health was grave, and I left my room and asked the doctor to let me say a few words to her. I spoke words of salvation and eternal life. That girl had faith and accepted salvation. She was very pleased and happy with my words about the eternal abode. I went back to my bed and stayed in my room. The girl was happy, but the next day she passed away. I saw a white light radiating from her room. It was the presence of the angel who came to seek her soul. She was enveloped by the light and slowly rising. She passed through the ceiling of the hospital and disappeared. I was getting to see the spiritual world. From the other room I knew what was happening in that girl's room. Of course, all this was God's permission. I was confused. I did not understand what had happened to the girl until the doctors brought the news of the girl's death. Then I began to understand the meaning of that vision. The girl had died at the moment of my vision and was saved. If I had not spoken of Jesus, I would have lost that soul. I saw many souls inside the hospital being swallowed up to hell. The demons take advantage of the hospital being a place for the sick, where it does not have the spreading of the word of God. So, that place is a barn of souls waiting to be delivered to the demons. Many who arrive there come with accidental or sick wounds. Being the serious problem, they come to the brink of death. And many believers have been discouraged from entering hospitals and bringing the hope of salvation to those on the verge of death. The souls leave the hospital lost and condemned to hell. When I recovered from my injury, I returned to work in my church. I changed the name of the church and removed the name that exalted the ministry. I put another name in my church through the covenant I made with Jesus. My church was called the Eternal Covenant. I started all out of nothing, had to get rid of false doctrines and relearn the word. I had to forget everything I learned in the seminar and re-educate myself. I changed the doctrine of the church and lost 60% of the members. They did not support the true doctrine and less than half the members remained in my church. Those who stayed noticed my change and saw my simplicity. I remembered the words of Jesus who said about the spiritual birth of my person. Many pastors who studied with me in the false seminary, when they heard my testimony, closed the doors of their churches to me to prevent me from sharing my testimony to their members and being made to shame for their own conduct. Others said that I was scandalizing the seminars, and many of them were failing as no one else wanted to take courses in their seminars or buy their books. I was threatened with death by Freemasonry that offers these theological courses and seminars. I had to leave my country and move to another place. I am living in Ostrava, Czech Republic, far from the prosperity preachers and gospel singers. Here where I live, Christians are giving up preaching the truth. They are slowly drifting away. Coldness took over this country. I ask all to assist me to spread this testimony and alert all those who follow the false gospel of famous singers and shepherds. May Jesus bless each one. Amen.
When you go to work and refuse to do your job, you get fired. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, congressional members are voted into office to represent our interests, which includes safety. Due to ongoing illegal border crossings, 90% of the heroin coming into America at the southern border, human trafficking, etc., our republic is under tremendous strain. Sovereign Americans are regularly murdered, raped, cut up, and run over with automobiles driven by illegal border crossers who literally have no business being in our republic. President Trump has tried until he tried out to get Democrats to work with him on a deal to properly secure our borders. But the problem is congressional Democrats do not want a deal. Thus, so far, not even a compromise can be reached that would include physical barriers in vast areas that remain wide open for disrespectful illegals to simply stroll into their favorite sanctuary city and wreak havoc. Thus, President Trump must hold the line and not cave into those in Congress who should now be fired. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us and 12 a.m. Sundays on Talk America Radio Network.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
All right. Let me get back to this article with the name of which is Toxic Feminism, the Real Problem. One last example from an article I linked to in Thursday's piece really brings the victim mindset into focus. The woman was explaining the politics of not shaving in this patriarchal dystopia. And about midway through the article, she shared the following story. And then, of course, there was my husband, who doesn't normally seem to care what I look like. While lying in bed one night, I threw my bare leg across his body. When my calf brushed against his, our legs sparked like kindling, and he abruptly pushed me off of him. What was that for? I asked. I feel like I'm lying in bed with another guy, he answered. What struck me about this interaction was that for years, I'd had a recurring dream in which he is unfaithful and tells me he's leaving me for another woman. I always assumed it to be a manifestation of my insecurity. That night, I had the same dream, but for the first time, our roles were reversed. I was the one leaving him. If feminine grooming is about achieving an ideal and masculinity ensures power as a birthright, maybe part of me wanted to level the playing field. It's pretty patronizing to have to jump through hoops just to be allowed into a game that's rigged against you anyway. So an obviously heterosexual man marries a woman who previously groomed herself, and when she decided to change and he doesn't want to feel like he is sleeping with another man, she is the victim. She changed, he didn't. Sure, a woman should be able to do as she pleases, but she has no right to demand that another person like it. The assertion that the game is rigged against you anyway, simply by being a woman, is another great example of the constant, woe is me, I am a victim mentality. A September 2018 article at Collegiate Times, written by Thomas Thorgerson, came to mind when I read that because Thorgerson pointed out, if you tell someone they are a victim their entire life simply because of their sex, you are creating an illusion and essentially setting them up for failure. In March of 2018, a self-proclaimed feminist captured the change in what feminism was meant to be from what it has become, writing, mainstream feminism seems to have turned inward instead of outward. The rhetoric is too often concerned with what women can't do as opposed to what they can. Folks, I am just tripping because, like I said, whether it be this, whether it be the homosexual movement, whether it be the black movement, the Hispanic, the illegal, it's all the same. It's all the same. The same spirit is driving this. Feminism, like other forms of identity politics, has become obsessed with victimhood in what I consider a seriously disempowering way. It has begun to feel like a religion with its own strict rules about what women are permitted to say, do, and think. You got this nice little thing here, this image, nasty women unite. Ugh. Modern day feminists are manipulating, controlling racists. I say bigots. We see the term mansplaining thrown out anytime. I think they mean mansplaining. Yeah, term man, not main. Must be a misprint. We see the term mansplaining thrown out anytime a man dares disagree with a woman and debates his point because these toxic feminists want to control the narrative without any type of discussion. We see them bitterly complain about manspreading because a man sits with his knees apart rather than squeezing the boys to the point of pain between tightly closed legs. We see white women continuously criticized if we don't conform to the victimhood mentality or vote the way liberals want us to. We see white men continually attacked as sexist for nothing more than calling a woman pretty. Now just imagine what we would be called if we constantly attacked black women or black men in the manner they are always attacking whites. We would be called bigots and probably deserve it if that is all we focused on. So let's call it like it is. They are bigots. In fact, just recently, they canceled a women's march for being too white. How is that not bigotry? I took a look at the USA Today feminist glossary because we didn't all major in gender studies and noticed a few contradictions, or shall I say, double standards. Let's see. For example, they define hostile sexism as the one most people think about, openly insulting, objectifying, and degrading women. Yet feminists consistently and openly insult men on a daily, sometimes hourly basis, degrading them constantly. Benevolent sexism is described as less obvious, kind of seems like a compliment, even though it's rooted in men's feelings of superiority. It's when men say women are worthy of their protection off the sinking boat first, or that they're more nurturing than men, therefore should raise children. It's restrictive. So the man should just jump off the sinking boat first and leave the woman to fend for herself because he wouldn't want to restrict her? Or maybe these feminists would prefer the man replace the word nurture with ball buster and be done with it. Yet, I bet these toxic feminists would complain bitterly about that as well, because that would be hostile. No wonder these people are so angry, miserable, and confused. They are offended by anything a man does. Read the whole list of terms for yourself and see if you agree. Most of them are just ways to manufacture outrage to claim victimhood. After spending the day immersing myself in feminist articles and browsing through over a dozen feminist websites, I think this country needs to have an open, long discussion on toxic feminism, because one article cannot hope to capture all the controlling, manipulative, bigoted, man-hating ways that modern-day feminists are using to destroy society. Yeah, this is just out of control. And again, I'll repeat, this article, there's a lot of links in here, as well as a couple of videos, and you can look at it on Politics and Prophecy on Facebook, on my Facebook page. Okay, so let's see here. What am I going to do? Well, it is time for Invisible Empire. So let's get to that. And this is actually what are we up to now? Part 6, it looks like. It looks like we're up to part 6 part 5. So let's check this out. The Invisible Empire full movie. Of course, this is just an audio clip. Again, I encourage you to check out this movie for yourself, this documentary.
What's interesting and dangerous about the New World Order is that it's not a natural progressing idea. It's just not civilization naturally evolving and organizing into this system. It's the group of extremely powerful people that are manipulating the system to get it to this status from behind the scenes without anybody's knowledge. You have to ask yourself, if there isn't an agenda going on to keep those organizations quiet and to keep them out of the news, to keep the discussions about them behind closed doors, then why is it that these supposed experts on the left and on the right never talk about them?
This has been a condensed history of the globalist organizations and their rise to power.
But is there a reason they meet behind closed doors? A shadow world government has been mentioned, but to truly understand what that means, let's go back to this iconic warning from President Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Progress toward these noble goals is persistently threatened by the conflict now engulfing the world. It commands our whole attention, absorbs our very beings. We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. Unhappily, the danger it poses promises to be of indefinite duration. The need to maintain balance in and among national programs. Balance between the private and the public economy. Balance between the cost and hoped for advantages. Balance between the clearly necessary and the comfortably desirable. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
America went into a major mobilization
revived its defense industries. And we saw the civilian economy of America more and more skewed through the 50s. Already in Eisenhower's time, he could see it coming, that you were getting a larger and larger defense military component of the economy, which, unlike the rest of the economy, was very, very centrally organized about lobbying for more and more new weapons. It was the political skills of this military-industrial complex, which I think Eisenhower was really warning us about, and rightly. There is a military-industrial complex. Today we see a situation where the civilian economy is really in tatters, and most of our civilian production has gone overseas to third world countries. What do we export? Our biggest export practically is garbage, but apart from garbage, we export military equipment. We have a special act which subsidizes, makes it possible for countries abroad to buy our armaments because it's too expensive to produce them for one country only. So we have become a very efficient military-industrial complex, but the civilian economy is only a ghost of what it used to be, and this has terrible consequences for democracy because it means that the power of this lobby is now sort of dominating what goes on in Washington.
Through multinational corporations, global intelligence networks, out-of-control banksters, all under the veil of national security and black operations, the global elite have consolidated power on a massive scale over the last several decades. You see, global corporations not only fund and develop large technological and military projects here and abroad, they also own the consumer industry and production, as well as all of the important media. By owning the vast majority of what we hear and see on a daily basis, we have been manipulated on a mass scale as to regards to what we believe and desire, both socially and politically. Edward Bernays, the nephew of world-famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, would study group dynamics and become the father of public relations. He authored the book Propaganda in 1928. In it, he described how to intelligently and consciously manipulate the habits and opinions of the masses within a democratic society. He went on to state that those who harness this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government and are the true ruling power. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world.
The average American is distracted, mindless, worried about minuscule things, celebrities, as if it was their own family members. And this is by design, because the powers that be, who own the media, know how our brains work. They know scientifically how the human mind functions. They know about sociology, and they are using the media, and have used the media for decades now, to entertain people with issues that don't really matter. When you have the big news networks covering celebrity issues as if it's the most important thing, it becomes the most important thing. And this is not by accident. This is to keep us out of the way. Because if you're worried about the latest celebrity death, or the latest celebrity couple, or the celebrity breakup, or your sports team having a shot at the Super Bowl or the World Series, there's so much information about those issues that can be discussed that will mesmerize people, and they won't know or care about the real issues that are out there.
Well, I think this is just one more piece of evidence of the degree to which the media, supposedly the watchdogs, has become the gatekeeper of the system.
Mainstream media are, first of all, nearly all of them corporations, nearly all of them now publicly held, part of the whole Wall Street financial system that they're supposed to report about objectively, but they can't. They, right now, in October of 2009, they are celebrating the recovery of the biggest banks in New York and saying that the recession is over. Of course, there are a few problems, like foreclosures are going on, unemployment is rising. All of this is affecting the American people, but it's not affecting the financial elite who also control the media.
Bernays successfully identified the invisible empire which controlled the minds of men. So as the populace is mesmerized and hypnotized by powerful behind-the-scenes forces, as they are distracted by the latest celebrity scandal, the newest cell phone, and their favorite sports team, this network disguises itself, remaining in the shadows. Despite the elite utilizing Bernays' methods, in conjunction with the military-industrial complex they had erected, a modern arm of this organization was exposed in what came to be known as the Iran-Contra Scandal. Essentially, black operations were not only caught dealing arms illegally and supporting South American dictators, but also smuggling drugs into the United States.
Iran-Contra was really the merging of two different programs. The first one was support for the Contras, who were, let's face it, a force of terrorists in Nicaragua trying to overthrow the Sandinista government. They were being secretly supported by the CIA, and at the bottom of the whole thing was drugs.
Iran-Contra was openly exposed by massive network coverage.
How was it that in 3 years, a network Washington set up to run arms to the Contras wound up running cocaine into this country for the most vicious drug cartel in the world? At the same time, we were supposed to be fighting a war against drugs.
But by the same token, I also smuggled my share of weapons in exchange for those illegal substances, with the full knowledge and assistance of both the DEA and CIA.
Betzner says that in 1983 he flew weapons from Florida to El Salvador and drugs from Colombia to the Bahamas on the way back. In 1984, he says, he flew twice from Florida to Costa Rica and back.
We could bring back our own cargo, and they would arrange it, or we could bring back their cargo without ever having to worry about interception, arrest, anything like this, that everything was taken care of.
What kind of cargo were you talking about?
Drugs.
Tolliver says he had 2 meetings with this man, CIA veteran Rafael Quintero. Then in March of 1986, he says he flew 14 tons of weapons down to Honduras, to this Contra resupply base set up by the CIA.
We take off from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and we leave.
To?
South Florida.
Where in South Florida?
We landed at Homestead.
Homestead?
Air Force Base.
This is the plane Tolliver says he used. The plane traces to a company that had a State Department contract to fly humanitarian supplies to the Contras. In addition to that, 3 dozen sources confirm the basic scheme.
We can now report that long before that operation began, there was another operation to provide guns for the Contras, which was also against the law. In this operation, Americans and Israelis provided arms to the Contras, and then the same network smuggled drugs into the United States.
The operation was launched in spring of 1983 at Washington's request, with at least $20 million of Israeli government money later reimbursed, we're told, from U.S. covert operations funds.
For about 5 years, people were flying arms into Iran, and most of them came from Israel.
The Israelis purchased the weapons from Poland and Czechoslovakia and began shipping them secretly from Yugoslavia to Bolivia, and then to Panama. The Israeli liaison man there, this man, Michael Harari, until recently a close aide to Panama's strongman, General Manuel Noriega.
You'd bring the ship into Colombia, you would load drugs aboard it, and you would bring those drugs back to Panama with you. But bringing that stuff into the United States, that was something else. I've never been so thoroughly disgusted with myself in my life.
This network would also be involved in the October surprise.
We really can't understand that unless we understand the so-called October surprise in the 1980 election, which is, I think, unquestionably Republicans, including William Casey, who later became Reagan's head of the CIA, negotiated with the Iranians for them not to release the hostages which were being held in Iran to Carter, but to wait until the Carter was defeated and the Republicans were in. That is what actually happened, that the hostages were only released on the day that Carter left office and Reagan came in.
Unbelievably, this same network would even be linked to the BCCI banking scandal by journalist Danny Casolaro.
Casolaro was probing a conspiracy he called the Octopus, which involved the Iranian hostage crisis, the Iran-Contra affair, with, believe it or not, all funds channeled through BCCI, the international bank charged with everything from money laundering to fraud.
BCCI, it's a shadowy international bank linked to terrorists, drug runners, and dictators.
Little was known about BCCI until 6 of its top officers were arrested in Tampa in October of 1988 on charges of laundering drug money for Colombian cocaine bosses. The BCCI men were convicted, and the bank itself pleaded guilty. But for some reason, the bank was allowed to continue to operate all over the world.
There are indications that some of the reluctance to prosecute this bank stem from the favors it did.
For?
The favors it did for intelligence services everywhere. Too many secrets of too many countries, too many prominent people, too many hands-on, and that makes it desirable that this entire affair be forgotten.
It began to become clear that the global traffic of drugs were funding violent dictators, rigging elections, supporting the arms trade, and enforcing the assassination of anyone who got in the way. Casolaro was found dead for his efforts in exposing this network. His death, of course, ruled a suicide.
He was meeting a source in West Virginia. He was about to discover all. Instead, his body was discovered in a hotel room with 12 slashes in his wrist, but when the local authorities ruled it suicide, the family said, no way. The housekeeper had taken calls threatening his life.
And I pick it up telephone, I say hello, and he say to me, you son of a bitch, you's dead.
Casolaro would not be the only person involved in the scandal to wind up in a casket. Meet Barry Seal. At first, the media portrayed Seal as a drug dealer gone good, who was assassinated by the Colombian mafia.
Authorities believe last night's machine gun killing of top drug informant Barry Seal was ordered by drug bosses in Medellin, Colombia, who sent 5 men to Baton Rouge to kill Seal.
Sam Dalton was the lawyer that represented the Colombian hitmen convicted of his assassination. We were trying to subpoena the CIA because we felt like they had documents, exhibits, and evidence that would indicate complicity in Seal's assassination. When they were able to gain access of Barry Seal's trunk the night of the murder, the personal phone number of none other than George H.W. Bush was present. Louis Unglesby, the former attorney for Mr. Seal, also confirms that he once called the office of the vice president after Seal had given him the number. You see, the Black Ops drug smuggling operation had not yet been exposed, and intelligence couldn't take any chances.
Yep. Good old H.W., one of the kingpins of the drug industry, the illegal drug industry. One of the best we probably ever had. But let's move on to another story from SHTFplan.com. Kentucky prosecutor looking into criminal charges against lunatic leftists who made threats against Covington students. Isn't it time to arm teachers? Oh, I say, yeah, it is time to arm the teachers, but even more so, I say that if you love your children, if you love God, that you get your children out of these indoctrination centers, period. End of story. Then you don't have to worry about it because you can have arms in your house. Anybody wants to do an invasion on you, then you can take care of them. I just read a story during this show about a man in Houston where 4 men came into his home, invaded his home. He killed 3 of them and shot the 4th also. So, hey, you want to protect your children and you want to educate your children instead of allowing them to be indoctrinated and then you trying to deprogram them with the little time that you have to spend with them. Don't allow them in the satanic cesspool hellholes called public schools. But anyway, this is written by J.D. Hayes. So let's see what they're talking about. Leftists who have lost all ability to be rational due to advanced stages of Trump derangement syndrome took to Twitter, as usual, to denounce the Covington Catholic High School kids wearing MAGA hats after scores of mainstream outlets falsely reported they harassed an Indian elder named Nathan Phillips. Subsequent reporting and videos posted to social media correctly documented the fact that the Kentucky students who were in Washington, D.C. for the annual March for Life demonstration did not confront Phillips, but rather he confronted them. By then, however, the fake version of events had spread like wildfire, triggering perpetually offended lefties who still can't accept POTUS Trump's election victory. But rather than merely spew their usual vitriolic trash, many of them actually made threats against the students, despite the fact that they had done nothing wrong. And there's a related story there. Says Catholic leaders dump all over their own youth to appease the lunatic left. The truth no longer matters to the church. Well, that's been going on for a long time. The threats reached such a volume and level that Kenton County prosecutor Rob Sanders felt the need to intervene. We've got multiple investigations into numerous threats, he told local media earlier this week. There's probably a dozen law enforcement agencies, if not more, involved in this. It's growing, it's spreading. There are other jurisdictions now involved in this, said Sanders. Specifically, the violation is terroristic threatening, Sanders said, which in his state is a felony offense punishable by 1 to 5 years in prison when such threats are directed towards an educational institution. These are not simply people tweeting nasty things, he added. They're making bona fide threats, and that's a problem. By the way, come on the heels of a recommendation from a commission in Parkland, Florida, site of the horrific Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school shootings about a year ago, that teachers be allowed to carry concealed weapons on campus. While it's good that Sanders and other law enforcement officials in Kentucky are being proactive in probing leftists making unhinged threats against Covington students, this is yet another opportunity to push an idea whose time has come, unfortunately. We can no longer trust that idiots won't be idiots, especially at a time when rational thinking on the left is at a premium. And, well, it would be nice to see, finally, some prosecutions of people that are making these type of threats. I mean, Kathy Griffin, what she did with President Trump's head, holding a head. I mean, there have been people, celebrities. It would be wonderful to see these people prosecuted. You can't go around threatening people with violence just because they disagree with you. It's just not acceptable. Do they really want a civil war? I mean, I'm fed up, but I don't, as a Christian, I don't want to see anybody, and I sure don't want to have to kill anybody. But I'm not going to I'm not going to commit suicide by their hands, but I don't want to see a civil war. I mean, it was bad enough what happened in 1861 through 1865 when we had the war between the states. We have never actually had a civil war in the United States. We had a war between the states. A civil war is one where you have the groups throughout the country going about trying to change the political establishment. That is not what happened with the United States in 1861. We're talking about house to house, street to street. We're talking about within families right now as far as if this thing kicked off the way that many are calling for, unfortunately. And, they're on the right. We got the guns. Yeah, we got the real men, blah, blah, blah. You know what? I just don't believe that people understand what a civil war will do to a country. If you look at the South after the Civil War, pretty much untouched. The South was devastated. Cities like Atlanta, Columbia, South Carolina, Vicksburg, Mississippi, just devastated. And it took a long time for them to recover. So if you can imagine in this day and age with the barbarity that would take place where people's morals have sunk to levels that have never been seen in America throughout society, it just wouldn't be a good thing. It just wouldn't. And I hope with the grace of God that it just doesn't take place. Am I saying that if anything, Thomas Jefferson said that the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of tyrants and patriots, because you have to be willing to sacrifice in order to achieve freedom. Do I disagree with that? No, I do not, because you can be pushed into a position where you have no choice. You know, it's either accept slavery or fight against the powers that are trying to enslave you. Unfortunately, in this country, we don't have enough people recognizing that or who those powers are. You've got these brain damaged, pharmaceutically induced coma zombies that can't put together two sentences, that haven't read a book in years. They can't figure out who the enemy is. Their enemy is anybody that doesn't think like them, anybody who hasn't followed the programming that they have succumbed to. Those of us out here that can still call a spade a spade. Yes, I said that. Wow, that must be really politically incorrect. But I'm not going to call a cat a dog when it barks, or when it meows. When it meows. I'm not calling a dog a cat when it barks. A dog is a dog, a cat is a cat, a boy is a boy, a girl's a girl, a man's a man. Well, I think I might have just went too far there, because these days, I mean, what's supposed to be a man? Stuff is changing. It has changed. I shouldn't even say that. It's changing. It has changed. Just those 3 articles that I just got done sharing with you in the last hour about toxic femininity. And that's the way that the left goes about their business, is that everything they do, everything they think, they project it, all the evil that they have in their hearts, they project it onto those who stand for righteousness, because they've fallen for the lie that they are being righteous. They're righteous in practicing and condoning homosexuality. They're righteous in condoning the sexualization of children. They're righteous in tearing down our borders and allowing any and everybody to come in here, no matter what kind of diseases, criminal past, or their intentions to just get on welfare that they feel that they're entitled to once they get into America. They call that righteous. They call it righteous to sit up there and say, well, we're going to tax and steal your labor. And it's okay, because government is God. The God of creation, no, he doesn't exist. But the God out of Washington, D.C., or in my case, Lansing, Michigan, and the city, you know, that's God. That's who we're supposed to depend on. So everything that is righteous, they flip. The Antichrist agenda is what they are following. And it is that simple. Antichrist agenda. Everything that the left stands for, there's not one issue that you can point out that the left is on the right side of history or spirituality. I mean, what just happened in New York? That Cuomo character is going to sit there and sign a bill that says that you can now murder a child at 9 months? Are you kidding me? And people are supporting this, and some of these are calling themselves Christians. Well, what do you think is going to actually happen when, through AI, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, or I should say the surveillance state, when they actually have this stuff totally implemented? What do you think those people are going to do, those so-called Christians? that if their social credit score, like they have in China when it's brought here, are they going to associate with you? If they do, their universal basic income will be shut off? I don't think so. I think that they will. I don't even know if it's going to be like the Stasi, the East German secret police, the NKVD in the Soviet Union, the Gestapo in Nazi Germany, where they relied a lot upon people snitching on other people. People were in so much fear that they went and reported their neighbors. They went and reported their family. Children were encouraged to report against parents. Guess what? If you've got an Alexa in your house, if you got one of these Echoes, Amazon Echo, it's if you got a phone, a cell phone, it's listening to you. And all this data is being collected. Not to mention, that's good. Not to mention the fact that why would they rely on people snitching on each other when people aren't even talking to one another these days? The level of communication is decreasing so rapidly amongst people. We're being isolated with the technology, especially, come on, if you go under the age of, maybe I was going to say 30, but 40, if you're under the age, people cannot leave their homes without a cell phone. They will go, I've seen people, I won't go into a specific gender, I've seen people that panic because they left home without their phone. A physical manifestation of panic. So they're not going to have to rely upon, like I said, your neighbors coming out and telling on you. The TVs can hear you. They can see you. Well, I don't know about the seeing part, but if you've got an external, so I should take that back. I don't want to be that doesn't make sense. I don't see how they could see you through a TV. They can definitely hear you as far as a receiver. For instance, on this laptop that I'm doing this show from right now, I've got my external webcam staring at me right in the face, and they can remotely turn that on. That's not a conspiracy theory tinfoil hat. They can turn that on anytime they want. It's connected to my computer. So if I'm, for instance, having a fellowship gathering at my house, as I do on occasion, and we're all sitting in here, our group is sitting in here discussing everything. If I do not disconnect my external camera, they can see what's going on, who's here, what's being said. The phones, I haven't made it a priority. I haven't even discussed it. I just don't care. I put myself in the hands of God and Jesus Christ. But there used to be a time where there's a gentleman that used to come down from another area in the state of Michigan and would talk to us about preparedness. And he would demand, it's in my house, he would demand that we all take our batteries out of our cell phones, and that was that, which was pretty smart. And if you do have discussions, if you do have get-togethers, if you're taking all of this stuff seriously in terms of what I and others believe is coming down the pipe, if you do have those kind of gatherings, I think you should make sure everybody removes their batteries out of their cell phones. Don't allow them to listen in any other way that can be done. Shut it down. Take those kind of precautions. I don't go off on too many of these rants these days. I used to do this all the time on my radio show. Now I just try to stick to sharing articles with you, not giving you my opinion, because I think my opinion comes through pretty much in what I share with you. I just want to present the news, educate, enlighten, and expose the workings of darkness. So I guess my opinion is that the Word of God is infallible. It's inerrant, and we have a world in which changes are taking place so rapidly, and the spirit of deception and the great delusion. I used to wonder about that when I would read it. I'm not even getting into this article, but I used to read about the great delusion, that God would send a great delusion because the people refused the truth. They didn't want it. So he sent a delusion. I don't see how that could be in the future. If you look up the term delusion, the word, and the definition of it, how can we be even more deluded, so many, in terms of what the governments are doing all over the world? You can't even tell people who won't look up at the sky and say, hey, I'm 54 years old. The sky doesn't look like it did when I was 14 years old. Not one day the blue isn't as blue anymore. And then they come out and tell you, okay, well, we're using global dimming so that we can stifle the effects of the sun and cool the planet. Okay. And I said that you all were spraying chemicals over the planet. Oh, you conspiracy theorists. You're a nut. There's nothing like that going on. ABC, MSNBC, CNN said it wasn't. Okay, but their scientists said they're doing it. Well, I don't know. You can't have a conversation with a person like that. If you sit up there and go to a site like Geoengineering Watch, my friend Dane Wigington, who has over 15 years compiled massive amounts of data, their own documents, and it's right there for anybody to see. For crying out loud, you had in 1977, I believe it was, the UN, they had a conference and they signed a treaty about not using weather warfare upon each other as nations. How could you use weather warfare if you can't control the weather? You had Lyndon B. Johnson, I believe in 1965, making statements about he who controls the weather controls the world. Yes, I do say he was a bigot, he was a mean, evil man, but he wasn't insane in terms of why he would say that if they didn't have the ability to do what they were doing then. Since World War II, this has been going on. But, pointed out to a large segment of the population, and they'd rather watch the Masked Singer on Fox or some Kim Kardashian mess or something, something that just doesn't make any sense. Or maybe go to Fox Television and watch Lucifer, the show where the main character, Lucifer Morning, is Satan, but he's tired of being a bad guy, so he comes to Earth, and he's actually kind of doing good for people. And then they portray Michael the Archangel as a bad guy. Yeah, why not just fill your head with that? And then you might ask me how I know that, because I was curious. I was like, okay, they got this show on called Lucifer. Let me check this out. Let me see what's going on. It blew my mind. I said, well, needless to say, I watched one episode. I got the gist of it after the one episode, and that's all I needed. But we are supposed to know the devices of our enemy. I cannot believe I have sat up here and talked through this whole thing. But I guess it's Thursday. It's the last day of the week as far as my week goes in terms of these shows. And I want to get this stuff off my chest. So let me see. I don't even have time Well, I'll just go through this because actually 1 minute, and I'm going to be sharing an audio clip from One Reality called The Problem with Churches Today. I think that's the whole title, The Problem with Churches Today. Let's see here. Yeah, The Problem with Churches. So, Facebook, speaking of surveillance, mind control, on Zero Hedge, Facebook slides after report claims 50, what's it, come on up, bring it up for me. After report claims 50% of its users are fake. As bad as things have been for Facebook since the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke 1 year ago, one team of researchers led by a peer Mark Zuckerberg at Harvard, who created one of the original Facebook prototypes, thinks the reality of the company's circumstances is even more dire than investors realize. In a report published Thursday by Plain Sight, an independent research shop led by Aaron Greenspan, analysts calculated that Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has been regularly lying to investors and the public about the company's user metrics, and that the company could be overestimating the number of users as much as 50%. I think I got this mixed up here. 542. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I got my stuff mixed up here, but that's all right. I'm done. I won't get to the last article, but I am going to share with you now the problem with churches, and then I'm just going to come back and start up the next video with Steve Quayle, David Langford, and Tom Horn.
I'm a Christian, I love God, and I love the Bible. But there is a serious problem with churches today that needs to be addressed. I want to start off by reading Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So my question for you today is this. Is the church loving God and loving their neighbor? Are they fulfilling the two greatest commandments? Let's start with loving your neighbor. The church spends thousands, probably millions of dollars on fancy lights, big screen, fancy cameras, comfy seats. You got to have your coffee, maybe some snacks. And they spend all of this money while there are people in other parts of the earth dying of starvation and who need medical help. And instead of the church giving them the thousands and millions of dollars, that way they can receive food and medical attention, the church spends their money on the TVs and the lights and the coffee and the chairs. While the least of these is dying, they're more concerned about their possessions. The Bible says in Matthew 25, starting in verse 41, Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungered, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in. Naked, and ye clothed me not. Sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee in hunger, or thirst, or stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did it not to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. Because the church has failed to love their neighbor, the end result is not that oh, well, God's just really sad, or that God's a bit upset. The passage said that these shall go away into everlasting punishment, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. That is the spot where the churches will go who failed to love their neighbor. In America today, more than 3,000 babies are murdered daily by abortion. Little babies being butchered up. And how does the church respond to this? Are there thousands of Christians trying to make a difference, trying to change these mothers' lives, trying to save these babies? How does the church respond? They do nothing. Maybe they'll throw some money in a pot, hoping that it does something for their neighbor. But every day, babies are being killed, and Christians are more concerned about the football game and the baseball game, or whatever sports is going on. Those are just two examples of how the church is failing to love their neighbor. There are many more, but it is obvious the church is not loving their neighbor. But what about loving God? Is the church loving God with all their heart, mind, and soul? I want to read you a passage. John 14:15 says, "If ye love me, keep my commandments." I have a question for you. Are you still a sinner? You may be like, yes, we're all sinners. Just because I'm a Christian, it doesn't mean I'm no longer a sinner. We're all sinners. We all sin every single day. And I'd respond back to you with 1 John 3, verses 8 through 9. It says, "He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinneth from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God." So you're telling me that you're born of God. And the Bible's telling me that if you're sinning, you're of the devil, and that you're not born of God, that you're not born again. Let's look what Jesus said about this issue. He said in Matthew 7:21 through 23, "Not everyone who calls out to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On Judgment Day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and performed many miracles in your name.' But I will reply, 'I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws.'" So if you're breaking God's laws, if you are a sinner, when you stand before God on Judgment Day and you're calling him your Lord, you're calling him your Savior, he's going to respond, "I don't know you. Depart from me, you who break God's laws, you workers of iniquity." See, we're all taught that our actions don't play a part in our salvation. But listen to the words of Jesus. Luke 10:25 through 28. "And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, 'Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' He said unto him, 'What is written in the law? How readest thou?' And he answering said, 'Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself.' And he said unto him, 'Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live.'" Jesus said it very clearly. That if you love God and if you love your neighbor, if you do that, you will live. It's time for the church to repent. It's time for the church to turn from their wicked ways and come back to Jesus and live for him obediently and faithfully.
You are listening to Politics and Prophecy with Chris Levels on FreedomizerRadio.com. We will be right back after these messages.
Here we go again. Another new year and the same old Democrat Party ideas. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards on today's page from the Edwards Notebook. Okay, I get it. Democrats literally have no good ideas when it comes to the economy, taxes, unalienable rights, national sovereignty, education, etc. If you refuse to believe me, go to the cities and black neighborhoods throughout America where Democrats have been the dominant political force for almost 60 years. What you will witness is a result of leftist Democrat Party persuasion, dominance, and just horrible ideas. As a result of such madness, a growing number of black Americans are finally walking away and no longer bow to the golden donkey. So now the desperate Democrats are still not bringing forth good ideas to improve our quality of life or protect our borders, but rather reminding everyone that certain people should receive reparations for slavery that happened well over 100 years ago. But you know what? I agree that reparations should be collected, and directly from the coffers of the Democrat Party for all the Democrat Party destruction to America from 1863 until now. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays on SHR Media at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, and 12 a.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on Talk America Radio Network Sundays.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
All righty. Well, like I said, I'm going to go straight to this Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, and David Langford. So sit back and enjoy what these brilliant men have to say.
Not by theology, ideology, or sociology, but every man, woman, boy, and girl will be judged by the Word of God. So myself, Tom, Steve, and whoever the person might be, we have a responsibility first and foremost to the Word of God. I preached in another church this past Sunday, and we have forgotten the power of the written Word. But the written Word is so powerful. When Satan tempted Jesus say every time, "It is written, it is written, it is written." And regretfully, because preachers fail to preach the Word, the people in the congregation, the people in the pews, do not know what's expected of them from God. But that's why the accountability will ultimately fall upon the ministers and ministries, because they have failed to preach the Word of God. I'll close with this and give it back to my brothers. Isaiah 58:1, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, show my people their transgressions and the house of Jacob their sins. We're not to spare anyone. I don't care if it's the president or for a custodian. You spare no one, and you show them their sins. And that's all the Phil Robertson was doing, was showing people that this is wrong. But because of the militancy of the homosexual agenda, if they will do worse to Lot, they wanted to know those two angelic beings that came, and they said, we want to know these men. The Hebrew there was Yada, Y-A-D-A, 3045 in your Strongs in the Hebrew. We want to have sex with these men. And Lot said, no, I've got 2 virgin daughters. Look at how far he had fallen. I've got 2 daughters. I would never offer my 2 virgin daughters up to a malicious crew like that. But he was willing to do that. And they had to smite, the angels had to smite them with blindness. Now that shows you the agenda that we're going to witness here in the last days, and we're going to witness the militancy of it. They're going to be so militant. They will murder, they will kill you, they will do what they have to do to enforce their agenda upon the people of God. Go ahead, Steve.
I think Tom and I can present, and I would say this, the most real, intellectually honest presentation with all of our voluminous footnotes. That's not the issue so much, but we can present to people what they might expect, because when we're told to stand fast in the Lord Jesus Christ with what's coming, it's like we're in a bowling pin and we're dodging 1,000 bowling balls coming our way. Maybe that's a metaphor that somebody can relate to. But with Jesus, he deflects those. So, Tom, as we're starting now tonight on this whole thing, obviously all the research you've done, let's give people the bottom line and work backwards, because given the fact that we've got the agenda of hell playing out right before our eyes, with the scripture, detailed scripture, with the gates of hell opening, with all the astronomical events taking place and all the astonishing winds and waves rolling and volcanoes going off, as you look back, Tom Horn, I don't think there's anybody that's got a better grasp of the time that we live in from all dimensions in Tom Horn. That's not flattery. That just happens to be I know him. He's knowing my friend, but we track in so many areas. But yet God, in his amazing divergence of specific callings and specific areas that he's aiming us in, I think that we've got tonight, Sheila, an opportunity on the 19th of December to really make it easy for people. So, Tom, I'm going to give over to you until you're ready to get back, but bring us to the conclusions. People have got to understand the lateness of the hour and the supernatural nature of the battle.
What I believe are the most important issues that the church should be discussing and isn't, and a lot of it does have to do with the fact that we're entering into what's called a hybrid age, transhumanism, biometric identification laws that between now and the next 36 months or so could literally bring mankind into human slavery. And again, Pastor Langford, I so appreciate your spirit. You know, the audience probably doesn't know that as often as Pastor Langford has done shows with Steve Quayle and I've done shows with Steve Quayle, this is the first time that all three of us have been on a program together. So, Sheila, I really appreciate you doing that. And already I love what Pastor Langford is saying. And you probably know this, Pastor. I heard an entire sermon from a megachurch on television recently, and not one time, not from the beginning to the ending, not one time did the guy quote a scripture. Nothing. And yet, Las Vegas-like level entertainment, right, with some of the performers looked like they were dressed to perform at Las Vegas. And I sit there scratching my head and actually feeling very, very sad, because for 25 years I was a pastor. I have a heart for the pastoral ministry. I have a heart for the church, but I was raised by great people. I was raised by people that survived the Great Depression, the great generation that made America great. And I sit there thinking, you know, if my grandfather was alive today, there's two things. First of all, he wouldn't even recognize what our government is, and he would wonder how it ever got here and why people seem to just have a glaze over their eyes as they walk blindly into human slavery. And the second thing, though, is, and this is true, both Steve, Pastor Langford, and Sheila, this is the honest-to-God truth. I think if my grandfather was alive today and was just picked up and supplanted into one of these megachurch programs, one of the Sunday services, I honestly think that he would I think he'd start trying to cast devils. I think he'd run out. I think he'd run out screaming. I think he'd believe that he had just been put in the middle of hell. I think he would believe that he was in the middle of the biggest cult on earth, and no way would he believe that he was in a so-called Christian church. He just wouldn't be able to identify with it whatsoever. He wouldn't even know what he was hearing. I'm not exaggerating that. He wouldn't even know what was going on. What an astonishing time, and how quickly we've come here. Now, you know, let me just get us started, and then we'll go, Steve and Pastor and Sheila, wherever you want to go. When Sheila talked to me about being on this program, part of the discussion was going to be about what is happening towards the mark of the beast. And you recall the other day we were talking about how these evil spirits, these demonic spirits, seem to be manifesting even in the names that these giant biometric corporations are taking for themselves. We talked about how one of the top biometric developers out there right now have named it themselves Kronos. They actually spell it exactly the same way, Kronos, and anybody that wants to go to Google and look that up can verify what I'm saying. But the public probably wouldn't know that that's the name of an ancient demonic deity that child sacrifices were made to for the purposes of alleviating human care. So I think Zenith 2016, one of them anyway, I talked about that, how that at the Bohemian Grove, the cremation of care ceremony is held for the purposes of alleviating the cares of those occultists, i.e. our government representatives and world elite, those occultists who have gathered there in front of that giant owl, which some people believe is Moloch. Moloch was the parallel version of Kronos, basically the same God by different societies, to whom human sacrifices had to be made for the purposes of alleviating human care. And if anybody thinks that that's some small part of history, there was an archaeological dig not long ago that found the remains of over 20,000 children in one place alone that had been burned alive and sacrificed to the god Kronos. So this was very demonic. It was very widespread and practiced. But the question is, what in the world, what bloodthirsty, human-destroying influence would be behind this major biometric company's decision to name itself Kronos? And those are the kind of things that kind of leap out at me. And so while I was sitting here waiting to come on this program tonight, I thought, hey, I wonder if I could find like a, what are the top 20 biometrics companies right now. So I went to Google and Googled it, and I actually found a site that was like the top 20 companies out there right now. And you should go through that site. I'll give you just a real quick example. Argus Global. Argus, of course, was a primordial giant whose epithet, paneptes, I think as they call it, meant that it was all-seeing, an all-seeing giant that had these multiple eyes. Another one on the list over there was Kairos, Inc., and it was spelled exactly the same way it is in the Greek New Testament, Kairos. And that leaped out at me because I've written about that before. But Kairos in Greek mythology, this was the demon of opportunity and timing, the right kind of timing, the right kind of opportunity. People say if you're at the right place at the right time. Well, in Greek myth, they would ascribe that by giving your allegiance to the demon of opportunity or timing in Greek mythology, whose name was Kairos, and he was the youngest son of Zeus. But why that's also interesting, and I know Pastor Langford already would know this, is that that's the exact word that the demons in Matthew chapter 8 used when they asked Jesus if he had come to torment them before the time, and that is exactly the word there, Kairos. Another one of these big biometric companies, and I encourage people, go look this up to make sure I'm not making this stuff up. If you want to know what the spirit behind the human biometric machine that's coming at you is coming from, another one was called Corvus, C-O-R-V-U-S integration, and of course Corvus is the everlastingly thirsty black bird, the raven that Apollo put in the heavens, who always longs to drink the sacred waters that are protected there by the giant Hydra, the snake that's in the heavens. Another one, Graule Biometrics, G-R-I-A-U-L-E, and Lord only knows if they took their name from the Lucia Shepherd story of Graule, but this again is a gigantic dragon. But here's one that'll really get you, Steve, Neokoros. Neokoros, spelled exactly the same way, once again, that it is in the Greek. This biometrics company, in naming itself Neokoros, it named itself after the famous temples in Pergamos in the Bible, which included a temple to Aesculapius, but there were 3 temples there, and it was called thrice Neokoros. But what's more intriguing is, given how the push for biometric identification in the United States is connected to what many of us might believe to be an imperial presidency, you know what I'm saying? The city of Pergamos, these 3 temples, the Neokoros, that's where the Roman emperors were worshipped as gods. 3 temples in which to worship a man as a god. And John, the writer of the book of Revelation, said that Pergamos is the place where Satan's seat is, where Satan dwelleth, Revelation 2:13, I believe. And some believe that that has specific reference to those temples and also to the altar of Zeus that was there, but it was dedicated to the imperial cult, the worship of Roman emperors as gods. And so think about the condition of our nation today and how basically laws are being mandated by fiat. If anybody thinks we're still a representative form of government, then they might as well, whatever, right? I don't want to get overly sarcastic here, but they should probably open their eyes. Not only do we have an imperial form of government right now that has as part of its legislation more than one, but especially in the immigration reform bill, a Trojan horse for the implementation of a biometric form of identification that many, Ron Paul and many others, have said this is going to be a federally mandated single form of identification that will be used in tandem with the scanning of your hand, your eyes, your biometrics, and it's part of that current stalled piece of legislation that they're waiting to get into the new year in January to start discussing again. But don't forget, when thinking of Neo-Koros and this imperial form of presidency and the worship of men that began there in Pergamos, that when our current president began his presidency, he also began it by giving a pretty famous speech. You know what I'm talking about? His extraordinary speech, "The World That Stands as One," in Berlin, Germany, back in 2008.
Absolutely.
And it was while he was there, he gave that speech. He did it just like Hitler would have. He did it right where Hitler was going to build his capital after he thought he would take over the world. But of greater significance is it was near the great altar of Zeus that is now in the Pergamon Museum. And according to different media reports at the time, Obama visited the great altar of Zeus, identified in Revelation as a throne to Satan. He visited that while he was in Berlin. But then remember, what did he do when he came back to the United States? And for those that may not know it, so I've got this open here now, Revelation 2:12 through 13 in the letter to the church in Pergamos says, "Unto the angel of the church in Pergamos write, These things saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is, and thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth." And that phrase, where Satan's seat is Satanos thronos este, literally where there is a throne to Satan. But scholars identify that throne as this great altar of Zeus that existed in Pergamos at that time, but that was later removed to Berlin and put there to be basically the central focal point of the great museum in Berlin. But now, what does Obama do? When he returns to the United States from giving that speech, he commissions the construction, remember this? I don't want people to forget this, of a Greek columned stage, which was a replica of the altar of Zeus, from which he made his acceptance speech for his party's nomination. In fact, there were newspapers at the time ridiculing that act, saying that Obama was playing Zeus of Mount Olympus. There was a New York Post article, this one that I can remember, it had a convention special called "Oh My God, Dems Erect Obama Temple." So even the media picked up on what was happening there. Well, there's been a plan in place from that day and forward, and so now, what is the spirit? What's happening behind these major biometric companies where one after the other are selectively taking these names, but very specific names, not just really obscure references maybe to a Norse god or something. They're taking references to deities and gods that also happen to be prophesied, for instance, on the Great Seal of the United States as returning in the great Novus Ordo Seclorum. I just happen to think that, man, talk about supernatural. I think there's something very supernatural pushing to come through now, but in one way, it really is mocking us.
Yes, it is. They're not even really trying to hide the satanic origins and intentions of their efforts. And I found that very revealing when Tom Horn talked about the names of these companies. Does anybody out there honestly think that the people who have come up with these names didn't know what they were doing? Seriously? So you've got CERN, you've got D-Wave, you've got quantum physics going on and all of this kind of stuff and these attempts. And some might say that they're past the point of attempts, that they have been successful in opening up portals, which explains the level of evil that has increased, not only in the United States, look all over the world of what's going on. I have the privilege to be able to speak to some people in Nigeria, chat with them, video chat with them. I mean, the stuff that's going on there. Now, that's something I can speak to specifically, but I could go Democratic Republic of Congo, the turmoil they have there. South Africa has been out of the news lately, but you have those people that at the ANC, the African National Congress, talking about they're going to take the white farmers' lands away from them. And there have been murders down there, talking about a genocide down there of people that have been there for over 100 years now, almost 200 years. It's going on all over the place. You know, a lot of times we can be so Americentric where we just focus on what's going on in America without regard that there are, I don't even know how many countries there are right now, 180, 190. So there's a lot of other countries. There's 8 billion people on the planet as we speak. A lot of stuff going on. I've started the show with what's taking place in Venezuela. Our CIA is up to no good. I mean, is a good guy and all of this kind of stuff. The policies, if anything, it should be proving to the leftists up here that their system doesn't work. No. They just double down, triple down. Doesn't matter about facts. Doesn't matter about history. You put God out of the situation and things don't go well. Satan is not a benevolent master. His whole purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus came to bring life to the world, light unto the world. Satan has come to bring darkness. And so many are falling for it. And the ones that I really get irritated with, and I guess I'll have to work on that, ask God to help me with that in terms of my patience, are those that claim, I love God, I serve God, yet you support every form of sin that is possible. It doesn't make sense. And then, you know, somebody that cares enough about your soul, your eternal soul, to tell you this isn't good. Oh, quit being judgmental. That's your opinion. Well, you know what? Since my opinion is shared with the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, well, I'll stick with my opinion because I don't think God has an opinion. He has commands and he has authority. And those are the ones that we're supposed to live by. So I want to do what my Father says instead of choosing Satan as my father, the father of lies. And that's what we're being inundated with. And we just have to wade through them the best we can today. So with that being said, if you do not know Jesus Christ, call upon his name, cry out, have a sincere desire to repent, to turn your life around, give it to him. And if you are in Christ, then seek to be a blessing to those that you are fortunate enough to cross their path. Be ready with an answer for them. Give them hope. And knowing that in this world of darkness, the only true light is through Jesus Christ. And that if we are in him, we have nothing to fear. So thank you for your gracious gift of time. I hope, Lord willing, that I'll be back with you next Monday and that you have a wonderful evening and a blessed weekend and that this program is a blessing to you. So with that being said, I'll close out the program and, Lord willing, speak to you on Monday.